and they said that our highest evolutionary trait as humanity is our empathy.
Unity is not going to be the product of everyone being the same. It's going to be the product of validating the differences between us that are constructive. Telepathy is the product of empathy. So it's not that you're reading someone else's mind. You're recognizing that you're having the same thoughts at the same time, so you know what they're thinking because you're so empathically aligned.
As we move into the next evolutionary stage of humanity,
You have to be the shape you were made to be. It fits with all the other pieces that are also being their true shape, and it creates the whole picture, which then can support all the pieces.
what our soul chose to be this life's theme and be in alignment with that.
It's not really about whether the ETs are here or not. It's really about whether we are becoming who we truly need to be. And by becoming more of who we truly need to be, by acting on our passion, raising our vibration, then inevitably we will run into the ETs. But that shouldn't be the reason why we do it.
Darryl Anka, welcome back on Just Tap In, brother.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I had a bit of an interesting question to open with today, and that is hypothetically, if our civilization were to have open contact tomorrow morning,
I wish.
who do you think we would need to become as a species in order to adapt to such a big change?
Well, I know that different people will react in different ways based on their belief systems, based on their upbringing, based on their expectations. So I don't assume that everyone will necessarily adapt right away. I think over time, humanity will. A lot of it has to do with letting go of our fear-based beliefs and the things that we have been sort of entrained to think about other beings from other places coming to our planet, because a lot of the early, movies and TV series and stories were all very fear-based about alien invasion and taking over and all that. So we kind of have to get all that out of our system, because a lot of people are still reacting that way to the idea of open contact. So we definitely have to be a little bit more open to being connected to our own spirit, connected to source in the universe, to understand how things work a little bit differently, to understand that we are all already connected to other beings, and that open contact is simply the revelation of that connection, not that it hasn't been there, but we have to be more transparent to ourselves and have to raise our vibrations by being so.
You and I were talking before the cameras were rolling, and we were talking about this movie, Disclosure Day with Spielberg, and we said we're not going to give away any spoilers today.
Yeah.
There is one thread in there that I did want to bring to the surface. One of the lines that impacted me the most, and this isn't giving any storyline away, but it was about, they were saying the ETs in that movie were teaching one of the humans, and they said that our highest evolutionary trait as humanity is our empathy.
Empathy, yeah.
And that really struck me.
That's the whole theme of the movie,
Yeah.
is empathy.
Yeah.
And how we have to be more empathetic, which means we have to listen, we have to connect, we have to open up to the idea that we are all interconnected. We have to start relating to one another, communicating with one another in different ways. The world has become very divisive lately. And so I think that that's a very important message that the movie can bring to us, is to have more empathy, to listen more to others, to understand different points of view, because unity is not going to be the product of everyone being the same. It's going to be the product of validating the differences between us that are constructive. Are our differences compatible? Can we move forward by using our differences in positive ways? Everyone can contribute something different to the whole picture. So it's recognizing the value in those differences that will really help create, more unity and harmony on the planet.
So this being, this entity, Bashar, that you've been connected with telepathically in a parallel universe from the Essassani, I'm curious to know what he's taught you over the years about empathy, and if other civilizations are also able to develop that trait to the degree that humanity has.
I think it's humanity that has to develop the trait to the degree that the ETs have, because most of them are telepathic, or as Bashar says, empathic. Telepathy is the product of empathy, because you're identifying on the same frequency that someone else is operating on. See, many people think, because we think in methods of separation, we have explanations for things that are not necessarily accurately defining how those things actually work. So when we talk about the idea of empathy and telepathy, we think, telepathy is someone is reading our mind, or we're reading someone else's mind. But as Bashar has explained it, no, you're empathically identifying and in training to be on the same wavelength as someone else. And when you're on the same wavelength as someone else, you have the same thoughts that they're having at the same time, because those thoughts, the frequency of those thoughts is equal to the frequency you're on. So it's not that you're reading someone else's mind. You're recognizing that you're having the same thoughts at the same time, so you know what they're thinking, because you're having those thoughts too, because you're so empathically aligned. So it's all about resonance. It's all about vibrational frequency and getting in harmonic resonance with someone else. So the ETs that are very advanced have the ability to do this. And that way, they can send, quote unquote, and receive, because in a sense, in a weird way, you become one person with a single train of thought, between you. So yeah, it requires a lot of empathy to be able to develop the telepathic clairs and abilities. Yeah.
There's almost a philosophical exploration there, because you said that 2026 is this year of disclosure. We've already seen a lot of secrets emerge to the surface. So it's almost asking that question of, what would a society be like if there were no longer secrets between us? Like you're saying with the telepathy, if I can entrain with your thoughts in your mind, then we can't hide anything between each other. So it's almost like, what would a society look like in that sense?
Well, it would be a very free society, in the sense that everyone wouldn't have to spend so much energy holding on to things that don't work for them, that they don't need. They wouldn't have to hold on to fear-based beliefs. They could really be their true selves, be themselves, and that way contribute to the whole society as their true self. But most people on Earth are, in a sense, being someone that they're not. And they're being trained to think that that's what you have to be. You have to fit in. You have to be like everyone else. And that usually means not really being who you really are. So a lot more people would be probably more creative, more loving, more open, more willing to take action on the things that are representative of passion, and more willing to be of service to others in that way. Because when you get to that point, that realization, you realize that you look at things as a whole picture, as a whole structure. And when you serve others, you're serving the whole. And when you serve the whole can serve you. When you're only focused on yourself because you have to compartmentalize yourself and hide things away because you're afraid what people might think of you, or you don't feel worthy or deserving, then you're only really focused on yourself. And that in some ways prevents the whole from being able to give you what you need. The whole idea kind of dovetails in with this concept that we've been talking about now for several years, called the law of attraction, which is one of the primary laws that Bashar talks about, because he's saying what you put out is what you get back. And the law of attraction is not wrong in the sense that you have to be the frequency of what it is you wish to attract. And you can't attract something that you're not the frequency of. But What is missing from that understanding is that it's not that you have to learn to be on that frequency. Your core vibration, your soul's vibration, is already broadcasting, so to speak, at the frequency of attracting everything that you actually truly need in life. So it's not that you have to learn that frequency. You have to learn to get out of the way of that frequency. You have to stop blocking that frequency. And the things that block that frequency are the fear-based and negative beliefs and ideas that, we're not deserving, we're not worthy, et cetera, et cetera. So when you clean that up, then the natural frequency of your soul will pull in every single thing that you need to allow you to be fulfilled in life. So that's the difference in the way the law of attraction has been understood, is that, okay, you have to learn to get into that frequency. No, you have to learn to stop blocking that frequency. And that's a very big difference.
Get out of the way. And BASHAR'S, one of his basic principles is anything you can imagine that is relevant to your life's theme is possible for you to experience. And I highlighted there and I underlined that is relevant to your life's theme. And I want to explore that in the sense of the law of attraction of how can we get to the core of what our soul chose to be this life's theme and be in alignment.
Well, that's where his formula comes in, because he's basically saying the reason that the main principle of the formula is to be willing to act on your passion is because he explains what passion actually is. And your soul communicates with your physical mind through energy, because the soul is non-physical. So it's not using language per se, it's using energy. It sends its messages of guidance through an energetic form. Our physical minds and our physical bodies translate that message of energy into the sensation that we call passion. That's what it is. So in that sense, the idea is that when we are willing to act on our passion, we are listening to the guidance from our soul saying, this is what you agreed to experience. These are the lessons you agreed to learn. These are the things that are relevant for your life. So it's always sending that message of guidance through what situations contain the highest amount of passion, because it's saying this is your frequency. This is the next stepping stone on your path. That's why it comes to you this way. And when we're willing to act on it, because being a being that is experiencing physical reality, we have to actually take physical actions. That's the language of physical reality, not words, not thoughts, but actions. You have to demonstrate that you are doing something, that you're following a particular idea. So when we do take action on the things that contain more passion than anything else, in a sense, that's the response to the soul that says, I heard you, and I'm willing to be guided by you. And when we ignore that, then, it's not surprising that we would trip up and fall into holes and have a struggle with things, because we're not flowing with what the soul is saying. This is where you need to focus. So again, it's all about following that frequency, following that sensation, because that's really an indication of who you really are and the path you laid out as a soul to learn the lessons that will help you grow as a soul.
I was telling you before that I'm really obsessed with a Netflix series right now called Cobra Kai. It's essentially about the philosophical battle between different styles of karate and karate dojos. And one of the styles, which is the Miyagi-Do karate, is more spiritual, more about karate as defense. And the other one is more about like striking first, no mercy. And they're having a battle, right? And they're having a tournament. And one of the teachers says, never put passion over principle. But in this lens, passion for them is the need to win above all. And you and I have explored this a little bit about if us acting in our excitement, in our passion, can harm or put down anyone around us. And we've gone really
See, that's,
deep.
I think, a misunderstanding and a misidentification of what passion is.
Yeah.
Because if people are really honest with themselves about their true motivations, the need to win overall is not representative of passion. That's pride. That's ego. So true passion is something that creates an equilibrium. It may result in someone, to use your example, winning a match. But the way that most martial arts are capable of actually accomplishing that is, in a sense, by matching the movement of another person. So again, it's kind of about matching frequencies, because when you, as a martial artist, can match the movement of someone coming at you, then for a moment, if you're matching their speed, their angle, their movement, for a moment, you're not moving relative to one another at all, right? You're completely matched in terms of where you're at relative to one another. And when you are not moving relative to one another, the smallest amount of push will send that person in another direction, because it's not like you have to overcome their momentum, because you're matching their momentum. And therefore, by not moving relative to one another, it doesn't take a lot of effort to get them to go in another direction away from you. That's really the core of the idea of martial art, is to be on the same level, be on the same frequency, to match the movement so that relative to one another, there is nothing to overcome. Mm-hmm. It's just as simple as just gently pushing someone off in another direction.
Where do you think we were, in a way, led down the wrong path as to being inside a society where you don't have a lot of people acting on their highest excitement or their passion?
Well, I mean, this is kind of just, this is sort of part of the whole reason why we're experiencing physical reality, is we come in purposely forgetting who we are. And that forgetfulness can create a kind of feeling of disconnection from source, disconnection from self-empowerment. But that's kind of the point. We're attending a school here, and we're attending an advanced school as souls. And the idea is to discover what your power is by coming from a position of feeling powerless. So that's just the curriculum of the Earth School, is that you have to sort of start in the negative polarity to some degree in order to have something to learn from, to have something to overcome, to have something to transform. You're transforming negativity to positivity, darkness to light, limitation to freedom. So it's not that we've been led that way. That's just a natural result of people coming in blank and not really remembering a lot about why they chose this or what lessons they're supposed to learn, trying to figure it all out from scratch. It's like just landing on terra incognita. You're on a new land. It's completely blank. You have no map, you know. So what a lot of spirit guides and ETs are trying to do is give us a map that helps us a little bit more, make it a little easier to reconnect or to experience the connection we really always have, because we really don't ever disconnect, but we can have an experience of disconnection. But we're creating that for the purpose of learning a lesson, of having something to overcome so that we can stretch and we can grow and expand. And that expansion that we experience, each of us, is also what expands creation, because through each of us, creation experiences itself, right? We're all the different ways that creation has of experiencing itself. If you want to call it God, goddess, source, whatever you want to call it. We are all aspects of it. We're all reflections of it, but we're each also autonomous. So that's the holographic idea, is that the whole and the parts are the same, but they have their own independent experiences. So they're contributing to the whole, but the whole is also supporting all the parts, which is all of us. So yeah, you just have to understand that this is the school we came to. There are other planets that are other schools, other different kinds of experiences. There might be some that are similar to what we're experiencing on Earth, but my understanding from Bashar and other sources is that Earth is relatively unique in terms of the kind of experiences or the mix of experiences you can have here, and the depth of the experiences,
the emotion
you can have here, both positive and negative. So it's really an advanced school in many ways, and souls choose this particular school because because of the depth of the experience, you can advance very quickly if you figure out how to transform things. So you don't have to take as long, in a sense, right? It's like going to an advanced course, in a university. As Bashar, I think, recently called it a universe city. Earth is a universe city, but it's a school for advancing very quickly if you can learn the lessons. You don't have to, but if you do, you can advance very quickly.
You've talked about that there's right now a thinning of the veil between physical and non-physical realities. I personally know of many people that are starting to get memories back from either we could call it parallel realities or past, future, whatever.
Yeah, sure.
It's all the same. And I'm wondering why that is happening more and more, or at least in my reality, I'm seeing it more and more. Where people are remembering.
We're approaching our graduation day. So a school has a curriculum, it has cycles, and there are cycles where you learn certain things. Enough people learn certain things that you create a momentum and a larger energy that starts to have certain effects on the physical reality that you're experiencing. And it's time to go through a different cycle, to start a new cycle. And the reason, therefore, that everything is kind of thinning and things that were heretofore invisible are becoming more visible is because at the end of that cycle, you're starting to realize we're the ones that have chosen and created this reality. And so when you start graduating, when you start getting to a certain level, you start recognizing that you're creating this. And then you can kind of see through the fact that you created it. It starts becoming less real because it is just a projection of consciousness. So the lessons you're learning make physical reality more malleable, more flexible, less concrete, less real. And therefore you start seeing the blueprint behind it. You start seeing backstage, so to speak.
Synchronicities are part of that.
Exactly. You start experiencing that everything is connected because synchronicity is linear space-time's way of telling you that everything is an aspect of another thing. It's all interconnected. It's all different reflections of the same one thing. It's all an orchestration. There are no accidents. So you start being able to see the template, the underlying structure of what we have built this idea of physical reality on. And therefore it becomes like an X-ray. You can see through it, right? It becomes less solid. So it's just one of the effects of reaching, so to speak, that graduation point where you've learned enough and enough society is now thinking in different ways so that you are experiencing and looking at physical reality as if it is a little bit more transparent, because it is just a veneer that you have placed with your consciousness over some kind of underlying soul template, and you're starting to see the soul template. And when you can do that, you can start to see things that were invisible to you before.
So we'll go deeper into graduation day, but to shift gears, in your life, I believe it was the year 73, where you had two back-to-back experiences where physical reality became more malleable and you saw two extraterrestrial crafts.
Right.
When I saw you...
Or the same one twice.
Or the same one. When you showed... This is interesting. When you showed that picture, because I had never seen that image until you were on this podcast with Maim, my jaw dropped because I actually had seen that craft before when I was stepping outside of the Great Pyramid, and it was midnight after a private visit, and it was hovering above us, triangular shaped with lights below, hovering, making no sound.
Yeah, a lot of races use triangular ships. They're not all saucer shaped. So it's actually kind of common type among different races. It just has different qualities to it. But yeah, more and more people are seeing those. But back when I first saw that, that was a relatively rare shape. So I'm not exactly sure why. But it took several years before I found out that in a compendium of all the different UFOs that different people had reported, there was only one spot where there was a black equilateral triangle. Now I think more people are seeing them. Whether that means more races are using them, or whether it's the timing to see that kind, or what's going on with that, I don't really know. But yeah, it's become something a little more common.
It might be related to what you were talking about with the cycles and graduation day in the sense, right now, this year, we've had a ton of files from the Pentagon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a lot of controversy around what else do they have? What are they not
I would say
showing?
we've seen maybe pounds, not tons yet.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure they have a lot more they haven't released yet.
Ramps.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that to some degree was, again, no spoilers, but that to some degree was one of the points made, I think, in the movie Disclosure Day, is there is so much more that they actually have that they have not released yet. And that's part of this process of getting more and more of it out there, so that by the time open contact occurs, we're not necessarily going to be quite as freaked out as we might have been had it been unleashed without that buildup, without that release of information. So there's definitely a lot more that has to come out before open contact, and ideally it will come out relatively quickly, but it needs to give humanity time to absorb what it is that's being released.
In your telepathic connection with Bashar, do you believe that this movie, the files that the Pentagon is releasing, put us a step closer into bridging between an open contact reality? Or do you feel that it's giving more resistance to the natural unfolding of that?
No, I definitely think it's a step in the direction of allowing people to start considering the idea more and more. I have noticed that the movie has had an interesting societal reaction because it seems to have created or amplified another divisive issue within humanity, because there are people that love the movie and there are people that hated the movie. And I think it has a lot to do with their expectations of what that movie was supposed to be going in, because there was a lot of secrecy around it. Nobody really knew what it was until it opened. And I think a lot of people's expectations got in the way of actually seeing what the movie is. And so I think a lot of them were disappointed because they expected it to be this or they expected it to be that. But I think if people just were willing to look at it as what was being presented on its face for its own sake, I think most people came away really understanding, okay, the movie was enjoyable, and it's also an extremely important movie because it does push the disclosure issue forward. Just by people talking about it, just by people being willing, whether they loved it or hated it, talking about the movie and talking about the concept of disclosure. So aside from whatever artistic shortcomings some people feel the movie may or may not have had, because I don't think it's as bad as some people are saying.
And you're a filmmaker, so.
Yeah, no, I mean, the movie is well done. I mean, come on, this is Steven Spielberg. The movie is well done. I just, again, don't think people expected it to be the kind of movie that it is in the way that the information is presented. But it's just as good a vehicle for that information as any other kind of movie. Maybe some people were hoping it was more of a mystery, like Close Encounters, or more something like E.T., where it's a little bit more feely, touchy, and it's not those things. It's its own thing. Yeah. And it really has more to do with the struggle between the two factions of this must not get out, it needs to get out. And that's really what the movie is about. So in a sense, it's designed as a chase film, right? Because it's about the push and pull between those that don't want disclosure and those that really think it's important to have it. And that's really the crux of the movie. So I really think people needed to go in just being willing to say, this is something different. It's a movie for the time, and it's a movie that is specifically talking to the people that know this has been going on, that want this information to come out. And it's more about making that statement that now is the time for this, rather than somebody going in and going, oh, I wanted it to be this more soft, touchy-feely Spielberg movie like E.T. or something. So I think a lot of people were just surprised at what it was, because they're not necessarily the group that follows what's happening with disclosure. They're not necessarily deeper into what's happening with the release of that information. They were just looking for some sci-fi movie that they, would like. And that's not what Spielberg delivered. He delivered something that is much more definitive and I think much more important as a statement about what is necessary at this time for people to understand about the ET presence and about disclosure and what's going on in the background. Even though he dramatized it, he also still represented a lot of the things that are really going on between those that don't want it out and those that do. So that doesn't mean everything in the movie is accurate, but some of the things are certainly accurately representative of what's really going on.
And we have those two groups, as you were mentioning. I love how you framed it, between those that want this to come out and those that still believe that it should be contained within the few.
Yeah.
And you and I are obviously part of the group that wants this information to get out. If not, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
No,
But if we were to step into the shoes of those groups that still believe that humanity is not ready for this information, why do you think, coming from that perspective, they're having that approach?
Well, it's fear-based. They think everything's going to fall apart. They think, it's about the public panicking and society breaking down and institutions breaking down. But fundamentally, it's like the loss of power, the loss of authority. They see things from that perspective. If something greater than ourselves is coming to us, which it's clear that they are, technologically advanced and spiritually advanced, but greater than ourselves, we tend to back away thinking that that's going to supersede us. But what they're missing is the understanding that a truly advanced civilization is not going to do something in a way that's going to destroy the society that they're interacting or contacting with. So they're going to do it in a way that allows us the opportunity to absorb it at our own pace. I think that's the reason why I think it's got to happen sooner than later that we have open contact, is because the aliens know that it's probably going to take us 2 or 3 decades after that to really get used to the idea that we're entering a completely different reality now. So this is why a lot of psychics have said we're kind of in a 3-decade resetting of humanity from like 2020 to 2050 or so. But the aliens understand that if contact doesn't happen at the sooner end of that, then we won't have enough time to really absorb it, because we're going to need time. Because not everyone is going to say, okay, we're all on board right at the beginning. There's probably going to be some fear. There's going to be some panic. A lot of nations may actually close their borders and withdraw and completely not engage with the aliens because they're afraid of what that will mean to their authority and control of society and all that. But again, the ETs understand we have certain systems in place and that we need to change those things, but we need to change them over time so that everyone can get used to the different patterns and the different changes, because they're going to be presenting us with opportunities we haven't even imagined yet. And those opportunities have to be introduced into society in a way that makes sense for us and our society. And it's not just like, wham, bam, slam, now you have to change tomorrow. They understand that humanity can't do that. So they're going to say, here we are. Now you know that. What we're presenting to you is not a fait accompli. What we're presenting to you is a new option. You now know you have the option to interact with us. You now know you have the option to take advantage of our advanced technology, our advanced perspective on how the universe works. But it's an option. You decide when you're ready to engage with us on that. But you now have the option to do so, which we didn't have before. Because my understanding is that a lot of ETs have been working with us already for decades behind the scenes, helping us advance certain things, implanting ideas about alien contact in our media and stuff like that to get us used to have these conversations. And the fact that we're having this conversation now is part of that plan. But it's also part of our soul plan. Now is the time for Earth to kind of enter this phase where we understand we're not alone. We're part of a bigger galactic society. It's time for us to begin to take our place in that society. But they understand that this is a transition. It's not a overnight. It's a transition. So we need a couple of decades to get used to this. And of course, remember that over the course of the next couple of decades, a new generation will come up and an old generation will die out. So the new generation will always be used to the idea that ETs are here.
Yeah.
And that will make it much easier for the next generation that's going to be taking over by 2050 to say, yeah, why wouldn't we want this? Why? Look at the advantages. Look at the benefits. So if there's still any of the old guard around still by then, they would start realizing, well, if we don't kind of come on board, we're going to be left in the Stone Age because of all the advancements, all the opportunities that will be presented to us that are now available to us because of what the ETs are bringing. We kind of realize that there is a benefit to going along with this because it's part of our evolution. It's part of our upgrading. They're not taking us over. They're just giving us new opportunities so we can evolve. And that's the way I think people will come to look at it, especially a new generation that's used to it. I mean, when you stop and think about it, you know, ever since the 1960s, any person born after the late 1960s and 70s knows that Earth has always been in space. Now, when I was born, we weren't. But people born after the 1960s go, of course, we've always been in space. We've shuttles and moon landings and, you know, space stations and stuff like that. And the sci-fi programs are all promoting that this is a natural thing for humanity to jump into space. So you have to realize that's a completely different mindset than those born before that time. So just like that, when ETs and disclosure are more fully presented, anyone born after that time and who's going to be an adult in the 2040s and the 2050s are going to go, well, of course there's ET. It would be unthinkable to think that there aren't because it's in your face. There they are. There's their ships, you know, and this is going to be a normal part of our reality. So it'll transition over time.
And because we're in a holographic reality, just to read a quote here of yours, he said, beliefs have to perpetuate themselves in order for you to continue to have a physical reality experience. Yeah. What we're talking about in the core is an altering or a shifting of a belief system within a species that then alters our physical reality experience. So if we change the belief that these beings are amongst us and they're here to help us and there's a lot more out there that we don't know, then our physical reality will have to reorganize itself to fit that new paradigm.
It does. It does that all the time. You see examples of it all the time. Even the typical cliche example of the 4-minute mile when people were running and no one broke a 4-minute mile until finally someone did. And as soon as someone did, the mindset was, oh, it is possible. And then you started seeing all sorts of people breaking the 4-minute mile because one person showed that it was possible. So yeah, as soon as you understand that your belief changes about what's possible, it starts to spread just like anything. And your reality shifts, your reality changes, and it becomes possible for more people because they now know it can be done because somebody actually did it. So absolutely, the reality changes to fit the belief systems.
Let's talk about time for a minute. I know that one of your favorite sci-fi films is Arrival. And they talk about, and we can give a little bit of spoilers because that movie's been out for a minute.
Okay.
But when the linguist in that movie, she learns the language of these beings, these ETs that arrived, what happened in her brain was something similar, and they call it, in science, they call it the Sapir-Whorf effect, where through language, through understanding a new mathematical language, she was able to perceive time differently. And I wanted to speak into that because our brains are changing with this consciousness. We have, you call the children that are being born now, new species that are also altered in their DNA.
Right.
So where do we go with that in the terms of capacities that are developing within our very own species at this time?
Well, again, it goes back to the idea that everything already exists structurally. And what people refer to as the Akashic records is all information, past, present, future, what we from a linear perspective recognize as the past, present, and future. But from a higher perspective, all exists at the same time. It's all there. You tap into it in different ways to have different experiences. So again, with the so-called higher vibrations that create the thinning of the veil, you're tapping into the underlying structure on the soul level, which accesses information from past, present, and future. So there could be, theoretically, a language that is more based on the idea of that simultaneity of existence and simultaneity of information, so that when you start thinking that way, you start doing what a lot of people on Earth can do from maybe a different approach, not necessarily a language, but from just raising your frequency. You start accessing more information that, from a linear perspective, might look like information in the future or information from the past. Because again, you're breaking down that projection that we have that creates that linearity, and you're starting to see it from the soul perspective, which can see everything at once. So again, language could be a way in which that can happen. I think that that's an interesting way that the movie depicted that, because again, language is also still vibration, right?
Mathematics.
It's still frequency. It's still proportion and ratios and stuff like that. So yeah, there could be a technique that would allow a language to be structured in such a way that it would open up your ability to tap into the simultaneity of existence, which contains all information. Again, we refer to it, colloquially as the Akashic records, but all you're really saying is everything is recorded in the fabric of existence itself, the fabric of space-time. And when you're on the certain frequency, you access the information no matter when it is that is representative of that frequency. So if there is a frequency that represents what we think of as the past, and a frequency that represents what we think of as the present, and a different frequency that represents what we think of as the future, when you include that frequency in what you're seeking, it doesn't matter where or when it's coming from. You will access that information if you have the right frequency to do so. And from our perspective, it may look like you're reading the future, but from your perspective, being on the right frequency, this is all just present for you. It's all in your present because you're accessing it from a more simultaneity existence,
Yeah. Like in that movie Arrival, the main character has memories of a daughter that hasn't even been born yet in her future.
Right, and they did that very cleverly because they at first make you think that it's something that happened in her past. But it is something you find out later in the twist, spoiler alert, that actually hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a lot of movies that I'm fascinated with, but I've realized there's an underlying, let's say, flaw within those movies. Because if we look at the X-Men films or we look at Harry Potter, you see that there are people that are either X-Men or mutants, and there's the ones that aren't. And in that movie, they explore the division between the mutants and those that haven't had the upgraded DNA to have these abilities.
Right.
In Harry Potter, there are the Muggles and the wizards and the magic. And it's inherently creating what I believe is this separation between those that have these abilities and those that don't have them activated yet. And I'm curious to know how you would tackle a topic of that nature once we start seeing many people, what I call popping with these gifts.
Well, even though it's presented as something more physical that you're born with in those movies, it's either a mutation or you have magic or you don't or whatever. It really still comes down to belief and what's on your soul path. What is the lessons you are learning? Because potentially, unless you have laid out on your soul path that you will not experience that, potentially everyone that comes here to the Earth School comes here to learn that you have that ability, but you do have to develop it. You do have to train it. So most people probably have the ability to transition from a non-magical to a magical person. It's not so cut and dried, I think, in the idea that, well, we have it and we'll always have it and you'll never have it. We just present the story that way because we're used to the idea of presenting things in absolute physical terms. You're born a wizard and you're not. But the idea of the Earth School is we're all potentially born as wizards. And if you don't develop it, then you're not. But you could develop it and then you will be one. So it's, unless, again, you have laid out on your life path that the lesson I'm learning is to not have that for whatever reason, then most people will probably find that there is some lesson path that they've laid out that simply gives them the ability to develop that idea, because the idea is to evolve, the idea is to improve, the idea is to grow. And that's part of that growth, is learning that you have these abilities, because those abilities are representative of tapping into more of your soul self, more of who you and what you actually are as a being. So I think that's the difference between those movies and the reality, is that they have to be presented in a more concrete way to tell a story. But the truth is that most likely everyone can develop those kinds of abilities, or whatever is truly allowed or relevant for us to develop. And certainly we all are starting to experience, like you said, more synchronicity, more psychic functioning, more telepathic ability, the clairs, clairaudient, clairvoyant, clairsentience, empathy. Again, it all has to do with resonance. So yeah, I think that's the difference between the movies and the reality. We mostly have the potential to develop what we need to be experiencing those kinds of miraculous things,
What you've done is brilliant, because you made a film where you actually had people study your brain under the channeling state, and you've demystified that process in such a beautiful way. I'd love to maybe get a glimpse as to what were some of the findings of those studies that you did when you started to scientifically look into this.
Some of them are, they're mostly mentioned in the movie that we did. My partner and I first contact, about how I became a channel and what BASHAR'S messages are all about. Some of them are mentioned in there, and one of the more startling ones, I think, was this thing called a set point. A set point is when you're growing up, you start to develop how your brain perceives and receives the reality around you, how it absorbs information, at what rate it absorbs information. And once you grow into a certain phase of adulthood, that becomes your rate of absorption. That becomes your set point. So it's, maybe 9 cycles per second or something like that. Every second you're, 9 times you're absorbing something, in your brain, is processing it that way. Now that set point, once you reach it, is never supposed to change over the course of your lifetime, unless you have like a head trauma or something like that, serious injury, then it might shift. But what we found out is that my set point is generally 9 cycles per second. But when I'm channeling, it immediately goes up to 10 cycles per second when Bashar is talking. And when Bashar is listening, it goes up to 11 cycles per second.
Wow.
He's actually listening stronger than he's delivering.
There's a metaphor there.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. And that ties into the message at the end of Disclosure Day.
Yeah, no spoiler.
No spoilers. But so that was something that was unexpected, is the set point that's never supposed to change when you go into the channeling state, which is the gamma state in the brain, 40 to 100 cycles per second of brainwave activity. It changes in seconds. It goes up. The other thing that was kind of interesting is you look at all the different areas of the brain that are active when you're just normally awake, like we are now. And there are certain centers of the brain that are responsible for processing your personality. Well, in the channeling state, the centers that are responsible for processing my personality shut off. So if those centers shut off, who's talking? Right? So things like that, we discovered, are definitely representative of the idea that the channeling state is a true altered state in the brain. And again, it's mostly represented by what we typically refer to as gamma. And that's between 40 and 100 cycles per second. It can go a little higher, a little lower, but generally in that range. And when you're in that range, your processing speed raises, you process information differently, you synthesize ideas differently, you make stronger associations, more of them more quickly, to different ideas and different things. So you are acting as a more efficient translation device for concepts and bringing them through in a more refined way. As the technician sort of explained it, it's like seeing things from a higher plateau, like from the mountaintop, getting a broader view of things and seeing all the connections between things and synthesizing that information efficiently down into just exactly what needs to be said to address whatever question was asked. So it's a very efficient and very creative level of processing. And that's why he is so encouraging about following our passion, because when you act on your passion, you raise your vibration to that level. Anyone that's doing what they love to do goes into gamma automatically. And that's why people say, well, you know, that person is in the zone, like a sports figure. They just can do no wrong. Every move is poetry in motion, right? Yeah. Or an actor that becomes the character. It's like no difference between them. They're flowing. They're in that zone. They just are that person for that moment. And you completely lose track of the fact that you're watching an actor. You're now watching that character, right? So it's being in that zone, in that flow. And that's why he's saying it's so important to act on your passion, because that automatically puts you in that zone. It raises your frequency. And when you raise your frequency, you are a better antenna, a better receiver for higher frequency information and knowledge. So that's why it's the first principle of the formula and why it's so important.
Mm. If there are centers in our brain that can shut off our personality, so saying that, you know, when you go to channel Bashar, Darryl shuts off, what does that say about our personalities and the identities?
It's a projection of consciousness, because it's not who we are. We are bigger than that. We're a soul. And we present a slice of what we are as our physical personality, because that physical personality is designed for this life experience, for this set of lessons to be learned. But it is a fragment of what we are as a greater being. So every life that we choose to have, reincarnationally speaking, we may choose another fragment to represent what the lesson path is for that particular life that helps the soul grow. And the soul will retain that experience for all time, forever, but then wants a different experience. So it has to take different aspects of itself to create another fragment, another presentation, another slice of what it is as a greater being. And that becomes that physical personality for that lifetime. And that's how we know that person. But you're seeing literally a fragment of what we all are as greater souls. I mean, it's almost unfathomable how much bigger we are than this, right? But it's enough, the personality can stretch enough to let more of the soul through, so that you have these awarenesses, you have these experiences, you have these realizations of what reality is and what your true self really is. It can stretch far enough to allow you to express certain things that in the past people would have called miraculous, like telepathy and like psychic functioning and things like that, because those are the abilities of the soul. So it can be done in physical reality, but it's going to be done in a way that serves that particular life path and the purposes that life path was created, not only for the soul learning its lessons and having its experiences, but also for how it serves others to have those experiences or be exposed to the person who is doing those things, because that can change someone else too. It can give them more understanding that there are more options, right? Because when you see somebody functioning at that level, you can get inspired, like, wow, that's amazing. I want to do that too. How do I do that? Right? So that's also serving the whole by being a living example of what can be done, of how much you can stretch, right? And expose more of what you are as a soul, which then shows them potentially what they are more as a soul and allows them to be inspired to reach for that.
It seems like right now, as a whole, we are being stretched.
Mm-hmm.
And what's also fascinating is that I heard you speak on the children. The future generations are more connected to their soul self or their spirit.
Yeah, they're coming through with more of that, because those lessons, the lessons that we now need to learn are different. So it's a different class coming in. It's a different curriculum. It's been expanded. There are more things, more subjects to learn at this point. It's a more advanced class. So you have to come in with more ability to handle those advanced classes.
Graduation day.
Yeah.
When people talk about the 5D Earth, what are they referring to?
There's a lot of misunderstanding and misclassification of a lot of those things, and some of them are relatively arbitrary from a physical point of view. My understanding of 5D is that is completely non-physical. That is going into spirit again, right? You can access that because then you're accessing, again, your soul, which is higher, non-physical than the physical realm. The way BASHAR'S explained it is like, look, you have density and you have dimension. Dimension is like a country. Density is like the states within a country. So we're in the fourth dimension, 3 of space, 1 of time. We're going from third density to fourth density in the fourth dimension. We're going from a lower vibration of physical reality to a higher vibration, but still physical. We're staying in the fourth dimension. When you cross into fifth density, you are also crossing the border from one dimension to another, from fourth dimension to fifth dimension. So you're going into a different country, but that's a non-physical country. You can tap into fifth density energy to pull yourself up from a third density being into a fourth density being, which is between the two. So you can use fifth density to your advantage to grow, but fifth density Earth is not a physical place. It's another reality level that is non-physical. So a lot of times those terms are a little bit arbitrary and confusing, but that's the way BASHAR'S explained it. Density is like a state within a country. Dimensions are like a different country.
Because the raw material talks a lot about density as well rather than dimension.
Yeah, exactly. But again, density is just another way of saying you have a certain frequency. And if you have a higher frequency, then you're going into a higher density. So it's really, again, like saying I'm going from California to Nevada, but I'm still within the United States, right? Which is the fourth dimension. So it's just another way of explaining it. Again, it's a little bit arbitrary, but I know there's some confusion about that. And people say, oh, we can have fifth density on Earth. No, it's not physical. That's the spirit realm now you're talking about. And you can certainly have physical-like experiences in the spirit realm. You can have a collectively created reality that can look very physical and can be experienced that way to some degree. But you also have the ability to just change it in an instant because time there, it doesn't operate like it operates here. Here, it's very slowed down to give us the opportunity to experience change, to experience the process of transformation. But in the spirit realm, it's instantaneous. Whatever you think of is exactly what happens at that moment. You can sustain things by agreement. Okay, we're going to sustain this reality that looks like a beautiful park, with flowers and trees and all that kind of stuff. And we can all agree that this is a place we kind of want to maintain. But if somebody wanted to instantly go to a mountaintop, boom, they would be there because they're creating that in the instant because things in the spirit realm are moving faster than light. It's a non-physical reality. It's instantaneous. But here we have the idea that we have to have some space and time because that's the whole point of learning the process of making a change. It's how you enrich what you already know as a spirit by adding experience to your knowledge. So only in physical reality can you have the real process of experience. BASHAR'S recently kind of used the analogy of, look, you can, let's say, as a spirit, you can have all the knowledge you ever could possibly have about how to build a house, but only by actually physically wielding the hammer, hitting the nail, hauling the wood, climbing the ladders, sawing the wood. Then you have a deeper, richer understanding through experience of what the knowledge of building a house actually is that you don't get in spirit because you don't need to go through that. If you instantly know how everything is done, you don't need to have that experience. So to gain depth of knowledge, you create this physical experience to really round out the idea of whatever knowledge you have access to, so that it is truly become part of you. And it really adds dimension and depth to the knowledge that you have, because now you really know what it means to build a house, and you feel it in your bones, and you feel it in your muscles, and you feel it in, the physical reality and the weight of it, and and you get a different sense of what that means.
That's so interesting. I'm like kind of speechless, but as we move into the next evolutionary stage of humanity, what you're saying, in a way of how I understand it, is we'll still have the depth of the experience, but the speed will change in a way, because
to
it'll
some
be
degree,
less dense.
and the kind of experience will change as well, because there will be things we simply won't need to understand anymore, because we've understood them.
Like what?
Well, like I'm saying, when just look at the improvement in technology of anything. We used to have to slog through certain things that took a very long time. Now we can do things much more rapidly. So in that sense, yes, the speed of the change of what we can accomplish technologically is to some degree an indication that we've already learned the lessons we needed to learn by having a slower process, and now we have a faster process to accomplish the same thing, because we don't necessarily need as much experience, because we've already got that under our spiritual belt, so to speak. So yeah, those things do change, and we start learning different lessons. And maybe now it's like, okay, well, the ETs have come here and they've said, well, now the important thing to learn is technologically how to create a portal, to go from here to there in no time at all. But how do you do that? Well, now that might be another process that takes us a decade to learn, as opposed to instantaneously. But in the future, when we have learned that lesson, then it's possible that, just like the ETs, well, you want to create a portal to go to the other side of the galaxy. Well, you can do it in 5 seconds just by doing this. But you've learned that process. It's already in your spiritual DNA now. So the next incarnation you've already got that under your belt. You've born into the idea that, well, I'm going to reincarnate at a time when everyone can do that in 5 seconds, because I've already been through the time when everyone took a decade to figure that out. Right. So there is a progression to that.
When it comes to ETs, and I know in Star Trek they have what they call the Prime Directive, where the ETs can't really get too involved in our evolutionary process. And that example that you showed of, they'll give us a, let's say, potential of interdimensional travel, and then we go out and try to build that. There are certain things that the ETs have been very clear that they don't want us playing around with, being nuclear energy, nuclear weapons.
Well,
weapons.
not playing around with it, but not allowed to have global thermonuclear war, because that would annihilate the school. It's a very important place for souls to come to learn lessons. So if you're going to actually destroy the entire school, that's not allowed, because that has effects way beyond the earth. But the idea of, well, if you want to mess around and knock a building down, you're going to learn a lesson from that, and we're not going to stop you from learning your lessons. But we're not going to let you destroy the entire university campus, because that's too important for too many souls in the universe as a place of learning, as a place of growth. So yes, there are limits to what they are willing to do. They will never interfere with what our lessons would be that we need to learn. But if we destroy our capability to learn those lessons, they will stop that.
Yeah. What implications would that have, you said, in the rest of the universe?
Well, again, think of it from the soul level. If there's no more university, where are you going to go?
Is there more universities?
There are, and there are. But again, like I said, Earth and every place is a unique mix of things, and may be one of the only places where you can learn certain lessons. So they're not going to allow that uniqueness to be destroyed. It's too important for souls and for the growth of creation to experience things that way, to have that option. So again, it's a city, universe city, University. And that university is very important. And if you want to mess around and sort of mess up the, one building here, there, leave some trash over there, whatever, well, okay, that gives you the opportunity to clean it up and learn your lessons. But if you're going to annihilate the entire campus, then no one can ever come here and learn the lessons that would be unique to that campus again. So again, that falls into their cosmic purview of the bigger picture of this is all about souls learning things in different ways. And if you remove one of those ways, that falls under our purview, and we're not going to allow you to do that. Yeah. And I think they've demonstrated that specific thing very clearly when you have various reports of UFOs appearing over nuclear missile silos and scrambling the codes or shutting them down and saying, you're not allowed to do this. You're just not going to be allowed to do this. Mm. That's the limit. That's where you've crossed the line, and that's where we have to step in. Mm. But besides that, it's your playground. So if you want to mess it up a little and learn your lessons that way, we're not going to stop you.
It shows the disconnection between how far we've disconnected from what our souls desire. So if our souls know how important this Earth school, this university is for us, then we would never be playing around with this.
No, but again, that takes a holistic point of view. And I think that's one of the most important things we will learn from the ETs is really, it's very, very different when you start thinking in terms of whole systems and you start understanding that every single thing is connected to every other thing, and that it is sort of a fantasy to assume that you can mess up one part of a whole and it won't affect the rest of it. But that's the way we think of, I can destroy that entire forest and who cares? And it's not going to affect anything else that's happening on the earth, but it does. Mm-hmm. It's all interconnected. It's a whole system. And so we're very slowly starting to look at things that way. We're starting to understand this is connected to that and this is connected to that. And you can't remove this without affecting the equilibrium of everything else. So when we start looking at things as whole systems, we will stop mucking around with the components and we'll try to figure out how to change things without negatively affecting the entire system. Because there are ways that ETs have learned to do that. After thousands or millions of years of evolution, they understand how to do that. And that's one of the great gifts they can give to us is how do you manage a whole system for the benefit of all without destroying the components that make up that whole system, without throwing it out of balance, right? So there are ways to do that, and they can teach us that.
There's an important conversation here regarding open contact because, and Disclosure Day touches on these themes as well, but I wanted to bring to the surface potential sides of what could happen when open contact is seen through the religious lens. Mm-hmm. When these ETs are seen as much supreme beings, saviors, rescuers, or even some may even see it as the second coming of Christ. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, the ETs will quash that right away. They will not allow themselves to be worshipped. Because they understand that they are not God. They're part of all that is. They're part of a source like us. But the other side of that coin is that a lot of religious people see the ETs in a demonic light too, in a negative light. And that has to also change. They have to understand that, again, we lack an understanding of how the universe works. And it doesn't mean there aren't negative entities out there somewhere, but they have to understand what's going on here. They have to see the bigger picture. They have to look at the holistic idea of what's happening here as an evolution. And they have to understand that for the most part, these beings are here to help us. They've learned certain lessons that allow them to understand how this all works. And they are doing their best to impart those lessons to us without necessarily forcing us to understand them, to just give us the option to understand them. That's part of open contact. That's part of what Bashar does. He's saying, here's what we know. I'm sharing all this information about how things work. When you apply them, you will see that that's how they work, but you have to be the one to decide to apply them. We're not going to force you. If you don't want to apply them, that's your choice, right? You don't have to learn your lessons in this lifetime. You can always choose another lifetime to learn them. So you can completely ignore what we're saying, but I guarantee that if you actually adopt what we're saying, your life is going to be better, because that's what these things are designed to do. These principles are designed to help you understand how life works, how the universe works, how you fit in, what you're all about, who you really are. And when you do that, you become free and self-empowered, and you have a much better life, a much more fulfilling, creative, and loving experience of life on Earth. So they're giving us the option and the opportunity to learn that, but they have a hands-off policy. They can't learn our lessons for us. We have to decide, okay, I'm going to apply this or I'm going to ignore it.
When something works for a species evolutionarily, then it then becomes stored in the collective mind of that species. Just like, when we discovered fire, for example. And what is something that you've applied from BASHAR'S principles that has worked for you the most?
Well, the formula itself. I mean, that's the distillation of how things work. The 5 steps, it's literally like an instruction manual for how reality is created by you. So when you get in touch with it and you use it precisely and regularly, then you do start to see things changing in your life. You do start to experience more synchronicity, more ease of flow, more balance, things like that. So it's something that you need to practice and keep doing and make it something that's more your first nature, rather than second nature. But it does change things. It does work, and you do get the result. And so getting the result encourages you to do it again and again and again and again. And then you get better at it, you get better at it, you get better at it, and things improve.
What is the gist of that formula? Just for someone
well, the 5 steps are, and this is very surface at the moment. We can, go deeper into it in another time. But the first step is, like I said before, act on your highest passion first and foremost, because that's your soul saying, this is who you are, this is their next step. You take that passion as far as you can until you can take it no further. And you have to realize when the excitement wanes, when the passion wanes, you have to look at whether it's waning naturally because you need to go in a different direction, or whether you're making it go away because of your negative and fear-based beliefs. So you have to have honest self-evaluation about why the excitement is going away. That's part of the process. Number 3, you act on your passion with absolutely no insistence or assumption as to what the outcome needs to be, because you don't really know what the ideal outcome should be. You don't really know what needs to happen next that will give you the opportunity to learn a lesson. So you don't insist that what you think should be the outcome really has to be, because you don't know that that's actually the best thing for you that needs to manifest. Number 4, you stay in a positive state no matter what manifests, because you have to understand that there's always a way to use whatever manifests in a way that will give you a benefit. You can't automatically assume that the thing doesn't belong in your life, because it is there. And if it's there, there's a reason it's there. Even if it's something you don't prefer, it's a reason that it's there. And that can be as simple as seeing if you are going to respond to it differently and use it more positively, or if you're going to react the same old way and say, oh, something's wrong, right? So it tells you whether you're letting go of your fear-based beliefs or your negative definitions or not. And then finally, you examine your beliefs, your fear-based beliefs, your negative beliefs, and you learn to let them go. You learn that they don't belong to you. You probably picked them up on the way growing up from your parents, your friends, your school, your society, whatever. But a lot of times people are holding on to beliefs that have nothing to do with them, right? So those 5 steps: act on your passion, take it as far as you can till you can take it no further, then look for the next thing that has more excitement, more passion than anything else, and act on that. Then you have no assumption, no insistence on what the outcome should be. You respond positively to whatever that outcome is, because you can always get a benefit from it if you do. And you examine your belief systems and let go of the negative and fear-based ones. When you do those 5 things, it automatically starts the ball rolling on a lot of different effects. You start experiencing more energy and more excitement in getting up in the morning and acting on the things that are really truly you. You find that your path becomes more effortless. You're not struggling so much. You find there's more synchronicity in your life. You find that you're connecting to more things that are representative, more opportunities to act on your passion come into your life. You find that you are supported in some way, shape, or form by whatever you need to be supported by to continue to act on your passion. So you find that there are different forms of abundance and support that can come into your life, not just money. You find that there is a reflective mirror there that also, while you're acting on your excitement, might reveal to you a belief you're holding on to that is out of alignment with your excitement, a negative belief, a fear-based belief. So you have to realize when you're acting on your excitement and suddenly you discover something that comes up that is a negative or fear-based belief, discovering that is part of your excitement. It's not an interruption in it, because you have to know it's there in order to let it go, to work with it and let it go. So discovering things that are not your excitement is part of your excitement, so that you can understand whether you want to hold on to that or whether you want to let it go. So all those tools start happening automatically. All those effects start happening automatically when you do the first 5 steps. Then it just becomes your life path and how your life unfolds.
As we're coming to a close in this multidimensional conversation, I'd love to ask you if you've ever thought about the man that you would have become if Bashar never came into your life.
Well, I don't know. But the thing of it is obviously this was planned out by our agreement on a soul level to do this in this life. So I'm not sure there would have been any other version of me if this hadn't been done. I can imagine, I suppose, what another version of me might have been like without this. I mean, I did, grow up as an artist, so that probably would have still been prominent in my life. I've always had aspirations. If I hadn't been an artist and a filmmaker and a creator in that way, I might have become an architect. I am fascinated by architecture. That might have been another version of me and might be in some parallel reality. So I really can't say what I would have been, because this is what was chosen. This is who I am for this life. And this is the personality that needs to be here to help Bashar create the experience of the channeling that is of service to others as well. So this is the slice of my soul that was chosen to do this for this particular experience.
Beautiful. As you know, Darryl, we end every episode with a segment called The Final Trio. You're going to make me want to not have any virtual conversations anymore, because this is even more excitement than I could have ever had through a screen. So thank you for coming out and doing this in person with me. The first question, actually, before we get into that, I know you have a few live events coming up as well. And if there's anything else that you'd like to tell people to connect with your work even deeper, even work outside related to.
Yeah, well, we're going to be in New York next weekend, this coming weekend. So people can go to bashar.org to find out any events that we're doing that are coming up. We're going to be in Indian Wells in July and Anaheim. So if they go to bashar.org, they will find out all about the different events that are coming up. They can also access a lot of the information that Bashar's already delivered that's been recorded. So they can go there to find out anything and all things that have to do with Bashar.
Beautiful. We'll include all the links in the show notes.
All right.
The first question I had for you for the final trio is, what would happen if millions of people stopped asking, when will the ETs arrive, and start asking, who must I become before they do?
Well, that's exactly what Bashar encouraged us to do, because we have to raise our vibration to be a little bit more vibrationally compatible with them in certain ways, so that there isn't more opportunity to react negatively, so that we can meet them halfway, so to speak. So that really is the important thing to focus on. It's not really about whether the ETs are here or not. It's really about whether we are becoming who we truly need to be. And by becoming more of who we truly need to be, by acting on our passion, raising our vibration, becoming more complete individuals, then inevitably we will run into the ETs, but that shouldn't be the reason why we do it. The reason to do it is because this is the path our soul chose for our own personal growth. And therefore, that's really the most important thing to focus on.
There's even a code on your T-shirt that's a question to ask to the public. What will you do if they're real?
Yeah. So how will you respond? How will you react? Will you realize that this is another step in your journey, that you also agreed to be here at this time when this is happening? Or are you still so disconnected that you're going to run away in fear and not face the idea that this is something humanity agreed to experience at this time as part of its expansion, as part of its awakening?
Right. What
will you do if they are real? Because they are.
Yeah. If.
Well, we pose it as to give people a chance to kind of like just sort of, well, I guess I would, I'm not forcing them to believe that they're real.
Yeah. If open contact begins soon, what is the one internal human technology we must activate before any outer technology is handed to us?
We have to get more in touch with what our consciousness actually is and the fact that we are creating our reality. We have to understand this is a projection of consciousness. We have to understand our connection to source and that we are a reflection and an aspect of it. That is the inner technology that will allow us to become more transparent to ourselves and more open to receive what the universe can give us. So we have to get in touch with who and what we really are as a being, as a soul, as a consciousness.
When future generations look back at Darryl Anka's life, what do you hope they understand about the courage it took to be a bridge for humanity's next era?
I don't want them to necessarily think that it took courage other than the courage to be myself. Because that's really the bottom line, is you have to have the courage to be yourself. Many people, as I said earlier, they're attempting to be something they're not. The analogy that Bashar often uses is to look at it like a bunch of puzzle pieces. When you have a puzzle picture and you have all these thousands of pieces, you put all the pieces together, it forms the big picture. But the only way that happens is if the pieces are the shape they were made to be, because then they fit with all the other pieces who are being their true shape. If you try to be something you're not, it's like a puzzle piece being a different shape. And if you are a shape you weren't made to be, it doesn't fit within the picture. So you actually have to be the shape you were made to be. But when you are, it fits with all the other pieces that are also being their true shape, and it creates the whole picture, which then can support all the pieces. So it's very important to have the courage to be yourself. I can guarantee that it does work better. I understand that the way we're taught makes it seem like that's a struggle and the hardest thing to do, but only because we're holding on to fear-based beliefs, negative beliefs that hold us back and prevent us from really experiencing the ecstasy that we could experience as our natural birthright of being a living soul in this universe. And the vibrational frequency, the natural vibrational frequency of existence itself is unconditional love. That's what we call unconditional love. It's the frequency of existence itself. So going with the flow and being in a line with that frequency is what will allow us to experience lives of joy, fulfillment, creativity, and love. And all that it takes is the courage to be yourself in order to fall into that flow. People use definitions to prevent themselves from doing that, such as the definition of what it means to surrender, because a lot of people feel that surrendering is giving up control. The idea and a more positive definition is that surrender is surrendering to the control that's already built into your soul. And your soul already knows how to go with the flow. Everyone has a current in the ocean of creation. You just have to ride your current because your current knows exactly where you need to go, and it will deliver you exactly where you need to be if you are willing to trust that flow. But that flow is built into you. You just have to acknowledge it. It again goes back to the law of attraction idea. You're already giving off the vibration that will attract every single thing you need in life that will fulfill you. You don't have to learn that vibration. You just have to stop getting in the way of it with your negative and fear-based beliefs. You just have to be your true self.
There is so much truth in what you just said. I can feel it. And it even goes along the lines of who we are, our soul in higher realities, is actually geometry.
That's one expression of it.
Yeah. And
that's still another expression of it, another level expression of it. It is not ultimately what the soul is. The soul itself is consciousness, is awareness, is existence itself. But there are different levels on which it expresses itself, one of which is mathematics and geometry. But that's as it crystallizes itself toward physical reality.
Yeah.
There are different levels of how it expresses that idea. But purely, it is just existence itself. It is just being itself.
Yeah. So be the shape that you were
Be
meant
the
to
shape
be.
you were made to be. Yeah. Then you'll fit.
Yeah. Darryl, this has been a dream to meet you in person. And I know we've already had so many great conversations virtually, but adding this layer of the in person and getting to feel you and feel your heart has been such an amazing experience. And I'm sure that people tuning in can feel that as well. And so thank you for going so deep with me, coming out here.
My pleasure.
And
Thank you
this.
for providing the opportunity.
Yeah. Till next time. Thank you, Darryl.
Thank you.